Good morning and welcome to Monday the 22nd of February's Year 4 Maths. Today we are doing lesson 5 in chapter 5 and we're continuing to look at graphs. Today you are going to draw and read line graphs. So we started looking at this before half term. So try and think back to all those things you learned about line graphs that can help you with today's lesson. To get started, I would first like you to do a give me 5. So there are 2 sets of questions for you to do. You can choose either the 1 star or the 2 star, depending on how much you want to challenge yourself today. And then if you finish within those 5 minutes, you can also have a go at the extension as well. So find yourself a timer for 5 minutes, pause the video and give the questions a go. Okay, hopefully you've given yourself 5 minutes to answer those questions and let's go through the answers. And here are the answers. So mark the set of questions that you did. You may have even challenged yourself to do all 10 questions within 5 minutes. And then the answer to the extension is here as well. So you may have had a chance to create your own diagram with a total of 250. So you have to check to see if your answers work for them. Okay. So today I said we were starting to look at line graphs, drawing and reading them. But let's have a think about when are line graphs useful and what do you think, or who do you think would use them and why? So have a think about when you've seen a line graph. What was it used for? So pause the video, have a little bit of a think about when are line graphs useful. Okay, so hopefully you've had a bit of a think about why line graphs are useful. So line graphs can be useful when plotting different data. And in particular, line graphs can be useful for when we want to see trends in the data. So if things are increasing or decreasing. So it could be that line graphs are used to plot the weather of 2 different cities and you'll be able to see over the months whether that weather increased or decreased, and then you could compare the 2 weathers together. So you may have thought of some different ideas as well. Okay, our in focus task, we can see we have got a line graph here, and it's really important when first looking at a line graph to look at what the data is showing, and also at the side here what the data has been measured in. So we can see the title here is showing us the amount of rainfall, and at the side here the rainfall has been measured in centimetres, and at the bottom it's the different months of the year. So we can see the average rainfall in centimetres in July, August and so on, and at the top here it tells us for the rainfall in Singapore. So let's have a look at this graph in a bit more detail. So what level of rainfall in centimetres do you think there was in June? Why? We can see that our graph starts on the month July, so we haven't got June on our graph, but we can use this information to predict the rainfall in June. So have a think, what do you think, looking at the trend of the amount of rainfall over the months, what do you think the rainfall would be for June? Okay, you might think that the rainfall for June may be something between 18 and 20 centimetres, because we can see here in July that the rainfall is 16 centimetres, and then we can see that it's decreasing as it goes to August, and then it increases again after that. And we know we can predict that as it's going from colder months to hotter months, the rainfall will decrease. So why was the least amount of rainfall in August. So we can see clearly here that in August was the least amount of rainfall that Singapore had. Why was it the least though? So we can have a think about what we know about rain and the different times of the months. We can have a think that actually in August, the weather may be warmer. So there is going to be the least amount of rainfall. And we can see as we go into colder months, the rainfall increases. So looking at this graph overall, what information would you use to predict what the rainfall will be in September next year? So if you were somebody who had to predict the weather for next year, what information on this graph would you use to predict the rainfall for September? Well, we could use September's weather for this year, the rainfall, and we can see that that is also at 16. And we could predict that next year the rainfall would be something similar, maybe around 16 centimetres as well. Okay, so now we have two separate line graphs. We've still got the one that we looked at before for Singapore, but now we have another line graph. And we can read at the top here, this line graph shows the amount of rainfall for the same period, so the same time, but in London. So have a look at the two graphs. I want you to think about these few questions. What is the same and what is different? What makes them look different? Which country had the most amount of rainfall? And in October, which country had the least amount of rainfall? So pause the video and have a think about these few questions. Okay, well, if we look at both line graphs, we can see that the same about the graphs is they're both showing the amount of rainfall. They're both showing the months from July to December. They're both line graphs. But what is different about them? Well, hopefully you were able to spot that at the side, the rainfall has been measured in two different measurements. So for Singapore, it has been measured in centimetres, and for London, it has been measured in millimetres. So that means that there are two separate measurements, so we've got to be careful when reading this data. Which country had the most amount of rainfall? So we might just look at the line graph and think actually the most amount of rainfall is in London because, well, we can see in October the rainfall is quite high compared to in Singapore. But we need to think carefully that this is measured in centimetres and this is measured in millimetres. It's two different measurements. We can have a think and actually convert the data into the same measurement. So here are London's measurements, and I've put them in a table here in millimetres. So what would be good is to convert the rainfall of Singapore also into millimetres. So how could we do that? Have a think. Okay, well, we know that there are 10 meters in 1 centimetre. So if I was converting all of the rainfall from Singapore into millimetres, I would need to times those by 10. So let's put them in this table here. So for the amount of rainfall for Singapore for July is 16 centimetres. So if I times that by 10, that will be 160 millimetres. And if we look at August, it's 12 centimetres, so it would be 120 millimetres. September, 16 centimetres again, so it would be 160 millimetres. For October, it's 20 centimetres, so it would be 200 millimetres. For November, 30 centimetres, 300 millimetres. and for December is 36 centimetres, so it'd be 360 millimetres. In the middle. So actually we can see that the country that had the most rainfall was in fact Singapore. So you may have not put it in a table like this, you may have just been able to convert it by knowing that there are 10 millimetres in 1 centimetre. But we can see that in Singapore the rainfall is much higher. So if we have a look at the final question, in October, which country had the least amount of rainfall? So for London in October, it was 92 millimetres. For Singapore, it was 20 centimetres, which we know is now 200 millimetres. So which one had the least amount of rainfall? Well, we know that that is London. Okay, so if you are feeling confident about looking at line graphs and drawing line graphs, then we would like you to have a go at working out worksheet 5, which is on pages 153 to 155. However, if you're feeling a bit unsure still and you would like to go through some more practice with me, then you can continue watching this video. If not, you could pause the video, have a go at the worksheet, and then come back to look at the rest. Okay, so here is our guided practice, and we have got to draw 2 line graphs on the same grid to show the rainfall in Singapore and London from July to December that year. So using that information from those 2 graphs we've just looked at, but putting them onto one grid, sorry. So let's have a go at plotting the graphs. So when we're plotting a line graph, first of all, we are going to need to plot the points. So I'm going to do blue for Singapore. Okay, and we can see, oh, that's not worked. Oh, there we go. We can see at the side that the rainfall is measured in millimetres. Okay, so it's gone from 0 all the way to 400 millimetres. So we need to put both measurements for millimetres, not centimetres. So for July, Singapore had 160 millimetres. So I can follow that line all the way up until I get to 160, and I can plot that point there. And for August, it is 120. So I can do the same there. For September, 160 again. For October, 200. For November, 300. Also, what might be helpful when you're doing this is using a ruler, so checking that you are on the right line to that number. And then for December, 360. Okay, so now I've plotted my points, and now with a ruler I would then draw a line from each point, and this helps us show the trend, so whether it's decreasing or increasing. Okay. Okay, so I'll go from my plot in July to August, September, to October, to November, and then finally to December. Okay, and that makes it really clear that we can see that from August, the rainfall increases. Okay, now let's plot our points for London, and I'm going to do this one in red so we can see clearly the difference. So for July, it's 62 millimetres. Now, if I have a look, each part is going up in 10. So I've got to work out where 62 would be. Yours will probably be more accurate than me doing it on the computer. but we can see it's going to be above 60, not quite half yet. So I'll put it there. And then for August, it's 68. So again, in between 60 and 70, but this time more towards 70. We can see that's a slight increase there. To September, it goes to 70, so that's on the line for September. For October, it is 92, so just above 90. For November, 88, so before 90. And then finally for December, it is 86. So nearly just over halfway between 80 and 90. Okay, and then again with a ruler, you should join up your points. And it's really important that you use a ruler as well. Okay, now we can clearly see the trends of the two different cities of rainfall, so we can answer these questions. What was the difference in rainfall between Singapore and London during August? So we can go to August and we can see for London, 68, and for Singapore, it was 120. So if we're finding the difference, what must we do? So key word to thinking about how we're going to solve this problem. Well, if we're answering the difference, we need to subtract those two amounts. So we need to do 120, take away 68. Let's write that. 120, take away 68. Okay, and you could use column subtraction to work this out, or you may be able to count on. So add 2 onto 70, and then we know we need to add 50 on to get to 120. So the answer is 52. Okay, and then in the last question, in which month was the difference the greatest? So the difference between the 2 months, which one was the greatest? Now we can see that very clearly by using our line graph. We can see that the biggest difference was in December. You can see that big jump there. Okay, so the answer would be December. If we didn't have a clear view like this, you could take away the amount and work out which amount was the greatest there. Okay, so hopefully that's a bit more confident with completing your worksheet. So now have a go at the worksheet. Let's have a look at what you need to do. So you've got 3 pages to this worksheet. Here are 2 line graphs again, but this time they're on numbers of cars sold by 2 separate companies. And then you've got some questions to fill out. So you first got to complete the table, just like I did for the 2 graphs on rainfall, to answer some questions. And then you have got to plot 2 line graphs to show the number of cars sold in company A and company B. So just like we did on the guided practice, plot your points. You might want to use 2 separate colours so it clearly stands out which company is which, and then answer these questions at the bottom. Remember, if we're looking at the difference, we need to subtract those 2 amounts away from each other. When you finish your worksheet, you can have a go at the extension questions. There's 2 here for you to do. Okay, so have a go, pause the video, and then come back for the answers. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at the worksheet, you've given yourself enough time, and you've even had a go at the extension questions as well. So here are the answers. So this is the first page. And here is the second page. So you may have used different colours. Okay, and then here are the answers to the extensions as well. Your story might be a bit different to this. Okay, well done for working really hard today.